My lab focuses on invasive pests and pathogens in forests, but we also think a lot about climate and climate change. Climate change and biological invasion interact in some really complex and important ways.
As ecologists, we have been trying really hard to communicate not only the aesthetic beauty and the importance of trees to the functioning of ecosystems, but there's an actual cost associated with losing these things.
So my lab focuses on a subset of the considerable diversity of invasive species in forests, specifically on the emerald ash borer, beech bark disease, which has been here for over 100 years, but is still a very important part of our forest and structuring the forest. We study the southern pine beetle, which is, as the name suggests, a southern species, but with climate change that is moving north.
The southern pine beetle is a very, very small beetle. The classic example that we use is that it's the size of half of a grain of rice. We actually found southern pine beetle in Maine and New Hampshire during this experiment. We have the conditions here, the climatic conditions that allow southern pine beetle to survive the winters and continue growing their populations throughout the summers. This is a totally new threat. Southern pine beetle hasn't really interacted with pitch pine trees that much. That is the main host species that we have here for it to live in and kill. And pitch pine trees are really specific to different soil types, so very sandy soils like we have up in Ossipee and Madison, New Hampshire. It's a globally and locally rare ecosystem, so we don't have that much of it in New Hampshire, but there's not that much of it throughout the entire world. It's very specific to kind of the eastern United States.
As the climate changes, the optimal conditions for the forest trees that grow in our landscapes also shifts. But trees obviously can't move as quickly as other organisms. Some of the insects and pathogens that infest our forest or infect our forests can actually move quite easily. So we're already beginning to see even native species from the southern parts of the continent and elsewhere moving north with climate change.
This research that I'm doing for this one chapter of my PhD is using the southern pine beetle pheromones to attract other insects in the forest. We want to know what insects that are already here might respond to a southern pine beetle infestation. Every 2 weeks, I go check these traps that have all these chemical lures attached to them. Potentially, these are southern pine beetle predators, so things that would eat southern pine beetle. There are other beetles that might compete for space within the tree, and this would ultimately impact how southern pine beetle might be able to kill trees, how big their populations can get, and things like that.
So these threats to our forests are dramatic, and sometimes it can be disheartening to think about all the threats that we have to deal with on a daily basis. However, the tools at our disposal in terms of genomic approaches, a lot of the biological control work that we do, trying to bring in species to control species that have themselves become invasive, give me some hope that we'll be able to at least manage the impacts and the spread of these species.
UNH is an awesome place to do this research. As a land-grant university, we have access to so many different forested sites to be able to participate in this work and to be able to really think outside the box. Beyond that, we have a lot of support to be able to write grants and to use our own imaginations to come up with research that we really want to do.
And people have been incredibly supportive of our work in terms of allowing us to access to their properties, and I think that reflects their commitment to proffer a healthy forest going forward.
If you like going out and looking out your backyard and seeing beautiful New Hampshire forests as you know them, as you grew up with them, as your kids might grow up with them, it could change in 10 to 20 years. And so we have a real need to think about what our values are and the kinds of things that we want to keep